From palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. And to our millions of YouTube followers, I will not ignore you this evening. You know, the YouTube folks, they all show up, they make us famous, and then all of a sudden we're live and in person, and I completely forget about them. So my friend, you see that mask? Nope. Yeah, I got you right there. Nose and mouth. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So I got to give some love immediately to our YouTube fans. Otherwise, they think that we don't care about them anymore. So now that we're back and in person, you know, it's a funny thing, this practice, because, you know, and anyone here like brand new to Buddhism, like day one, you just stumbled in here because, you know, pizza place was closed or anything. We've all been around a little bit. You three huddled in the back. Is this your first time here? Yeah. Your first Buddhist thing? Yeah, you kind of like all packed together when I said that. That's why I signaled you out all the way hiding in the back. This practice is a funny thing because, like, I mean, the Buddha taught that we suffer a lot in our lives, right? Anyone here had suffering in their life? Right? So we suffer quite a bit throughout our lives. But the practice is to begin to recognize, like, why? Where is that suffering coming from? And, you know, I just had some interactions very recently, and that's why this is fresh in my mind, with some people that, you know, they're really interested in Buddhism, but they're so closed off to actually opening the mind to recognizing that, gee, maybe they're part of the reason that they're suffering. And so for those who have been around this a while and listened to me a long time, and for those who are, you know, maybe brand new, like day one, my tip for new people and reminder for those who are around a lot is to remember that if we're going to cultivate any spiritual practice, any sense of like feeling okay and happy and peaceful throughout your day, then there absolutely has to be from the individual a little bit of an opening that says, hey, my ego maybe needs a little bit of work, or my kind of wall that I'm putting up maybe needs to come down a little bit. It's really important to recognize this, because no person that you sit with, you know, whether it's myself or any of the other millions of people sharing Buddhist teachings, none of us can do anything for you. And in fact, those of us who share the Dharma, we're one of the, let me give this as an example. One of the greatest things that I read about the Buddha when he would teach is that no matter how many people that were there, no matter who was there, everything that he said was immediately grasped and understood by everybody who was there. And I thought that was like super profound, right? Because to me, what I gleaned from that teaching is that he wasn't like doing therapy with people. He wasn't getting into people's specifics. He wasn't listening to like your drama and your stories and then trying to solve like your own personal problems. Who can solve you got any personal problems, Tony? Who can solve your personal problems?
Myself.
Yourself and yourself only, right? But often, and this is also for the new people, when you come to places like this, there's this idea that the person sitting here is going to have some like great wisdom beyond all of you, you know? You know what I do when I sit here? I sit here and I look out at all of you and I think I am the one learning. And I'm sitting here with like 20 something people who are teaching me every week. And I mean that very seriously. Because that's the only way for a kid who grew up with the ego that I had to actually humble myself and say, wow, look at the dedication, look at the commitment, look at the effort that all of these people make week in and week out to show up. I got a lot to learn. And if I'm the one sitting here with that view, all I can try to do is help people understand that when you soften the ego, when you drop the walls a little bit, and you recognize that nobody else can do this for you, then you begin to kind of hear, like, what is the Dharma? What is the Buddha's teachings? What did he say? And how can you put that into your life? And I say this, so passionately because for me, one of the practice is to not attach to people's own personal journeys. If I did that, this stuff would be impossible, right? So that's one of the practices, is to not attach to people's own personal journeys. One of the frustrations is when you see people who are like really, really suffering, which we see constantly, and you have made it so blatantly clear to them how to walk this path a little bit, and there's just this constant resistance and these walls that come up that say, nope, I'm going to do things my way. Okay? And so my last thought on that is, if you ended up here, right, whether you came here on your own volition or, maybe somebody dragged you here, or the three of you got completely lost and you're like, hey, look at this cool building, let's go check that out, right? Please understand that the suffering that we experience on a day-to-day basis is rough, and it's no fun. It's no fun to be sad and angry and miserable and depressed and anxious all day long. It's no fun to have hearts broken and to see people we love suffer and to go through trauma and things like that. It's tough. Soften a little bit. Be willing to work on things in your life. Because if you do that, and if you don't stay closed off so much, man, you can just be happier. How old are you, my friend?
I'm 11.
11. I love when 11-year-olds are here. Your mom brought you. I thought you brought your mom, maybe.
We brought my dad.
It's a team effort, We won't go into who brought who first, right? But 11-year-olds are so much smarter than the rest of us. Don't get too excited about this, but they're usually, the Zen practice, and then I'll shut up and we'll do a meditation. But there's the teaching the beginner's mind, and that 11-year-old mind is just so fresh and observing, And by the time you get older, we get so stuck, So please, what's your name? The 11-year-old? Sarah, if you have any wisdom at any point in time, or you want to say anything tonight, you just let me know. Okay? Do you want to lead the meditation? No? You sure? All right, well, if you change your mind when we start meditation and we all sit here and our eyes are closed, if you want to come up here and start hitting the bell, go for it. All right? Okay. So with that, we're going to start a meditation practice. We'll go from there. So a couple of things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. don't judge your practice. Meaning, don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, or a bench or a chair, just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not expect anything, but to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, It's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. And you react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your days. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, and focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. Most of us probably won't even make it home before we're disturbed. Hopefully out of the building. This practice is not necessarily easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not an escape, as often people think it is, especially if you're new. It's not closing your eyes and pretending you're sailing down a river and looking at all the birds and trees and flowers and thinking everything is wonderful. Life is filled with tremendous chaos. And this practice is direct perception into the present moment. And very often that present moment is incredibly difficult. And the unfortunate reality is that so many of us spend so much of our lives trying to escape from and run away from the present moment because the present moment is uncomfortable. And what the Buddha was teaching us was to look at what's uncomfortable and to sit with it so you can explore it and understand where that discomfort is coming from. Lots of things bring us, a sense of temporary happiness, joy, pleasure. But if we're always escaping from present moment, then we'll spend the rest of our lives trying to escape from present moment. Learning to be with life as it is and make adjustments in your own heart and your own mind as you go is the practice. And that never gets, unfortunately, at least in my experience of the last 19 years, that never gets easy. It's not like you wake up one day and you're like, oh, this is a piece of cake. You recognize difficulties, you recognize challenges, you recognize obstacles in your life, and you begin to see that all of them are coming from where? Your mind. Now, unless any of you, hey Sarah, do you have some friends? What's that? You have some friends at home? Are they waiting for you, like throwing a big party when you get back? No? Do your friends always do everything you want them to? They never do. See, I told you, 11-year-olds are so much smarter than us. Right? They never do anything you want them to. And how does that make you feel? They always do everything they want to. Doesn't that suck? Or does it possibly mean that they're doing what they want to because it makes them, what do you think? Fill in the blank. If they're doing what they want, what does that mean about how they might feel?
I don't know, because one of my friends, she's as old as me, but she's a little bit older.
Yeah.
And she's always on her phone. And the other
Darn
one,
phones.
she has a 5-year-old sister. She's sometimes annoying, always wants to do what she wants because she's 5 years old.
Yes.
And there's another one that's a little bit younger than me. She's like, 9 years old. No, 8, 9, 10, I don't know. She's really young.
Yeah.
So she always wants to do it.
I hear you. Man, I just wish. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Sarah.
I don't even know what I want to do.
I just wish all of you at home could listen to this. I don't know if you could hear that at all. So here's the thing. Who in here is not 5 years old? And who in here spends your entire life doing what you want? What? Did you all just forget how to raise your hand? Are there actually people in this room that don't do what they want? Right? So again, to me, 11-year-olds, so brilliant. Your friends don't do what you want them to. They're doing what they want that makes them happy. And sometimes that really bothers us. Now, for all of us, to me, the lesson here and the practice is to recognize we are that friend that is very often doing what we want. And when we do what we want, other people get unhappy. We are that friend that annoys other people. I mean, I'm sure nobody here, but maybe a couple others. You know? Our lives, people around us are never going to do. Right? I mean, I hate to break it to you, Sarah, and I don't want to shatter like your entire view of the rest of your life. But unfortunately, most of your life, people aren't going to do what you want them to. And the sooner you learn that, the easier things will be. You know? Good. This is the challenge. It's really as simple as this, right? Our lives are spent doing what we want, and when we do what we want, sometimes it can be selfish, sometimes it can be driven by ego and pride and cravings and desires. And when we do what we want, and the Buddha taught very clearly that we suffer, we experience suffering because of our cravings and our desires, and our pride and our ego, because we're focused on me, self. So this practice is about overcoming some of that sense of self. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Water is free. Right? It's not back there. It's downstairs. Sorry. And once we stop trying to change, fix, control, and manipulate all of our friends and people around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. And then maybe we can recognize that we're just going to be happy that our friends are doing what they want. And that's tough. So with that, I'll just pause. I really prefer just to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that you're sitting with, and we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening for questions. And for all the YouTube folks, I can actually see the screen now. So if you have any questions, again, thanks for being here. Feel free to chime in, say hello to each other. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to respond as well. And I promise to stop ignoring you. Yeah.
I was going to ask, what about problems that are external, like structural problems like racism, sexism?
Yeah. So the question, just to repeat for those who maybe didn't hear it, is what about problems that are external? What's that?
I said also internal, but more.
I'm glad you added that. So first question was, what about questions that are external, such as racism, sexism, things like that? And then as I was repeating it, you said it's also internal. Great place to start, right? So first off, yes, there are clearly things going on in our family structures, our local communities, our cities, our countries, and the global world that we live in, that are incredibly toxic and unhealthy. I often speak about my life growing up as a privileged white straight able-bodied Jewish kid from San Diego, who has about every privilege in the book, and grew up fully aware of that. And Buddhist practice has helped me see that I have a role to play in all of those things. So if I want racism to end, then I have to be incredibly honest with myself about every single racial bias I have and that I grew up with. And there's a lot of them. Right? When you grow up in an upper class, predominantly white neighborhood in San Diego, you know what you see? Upper class, predominantly white people. Right? So again, without getting into my whole story, I just want to give you some insight that I would always start. The first part of what I want to say is I would always start with, okay, what's my role? How did I grow up with racial views or tendencies or bias or racial actions? All of those things existed, right? Sexist views, right? Toxic masculinity, all of those things. Welcome to my life, right? So Buddhist practice was like a mirror and said, if I'm going to see that these problems exist in the world and all the hate and anger and oppression and everything that exists, which is there and it's sickening, I have to deeply, deeply explore my relationship and my role in it. Because only then can I begin to see how can I work with people to maybe cut through some of this. But if I ignore my role and my views, then I don't think that's beneficial, right? So does that help kind of paint the picture? Yeah, you can't, I'm not suggesting that you're saying this, but just in general, you can't ignore, right? Buddhist practice is not about ignoring what's going on in the world. It's not about saying, well, I'm just present and I'm here and everything's fine, right? No, I mean, all these things exist and they're not okay. And for me, I always look at Thich Nhat Hanh as the great Zen master who recently passed, but did a lot of work, and I say this all the time, but with Martin Luther King around racial justice, social justice issues. He kind of coined the phrase what's called engaged Buddhism. I don't know if you ever heard that. Have you heard that phrase?
No, I'm
Yeah. What's that?
I said I'm just familiar with that.
Yeah, so engaged Buddhism, it's very much about engaging in society and recognizing all of these things that exist and how you can, as an individual, as a community, as a society, work to make change. But the awareness is step one. So hopefully that's helpful. Yeah.
My daughter's here in the back for the first time with her friend.
Oh, that's the crew all huddled together. They've been trying to get you here for like 5 years. You made it.
Yeah.
Was that all you wanted to say, or was there a question? Okay.
Not sure she's wondering. You had this question
Yeah.
all the time. Who's that skinny figure?
The skinny figure.
Altar.
Yes. So this guy up here, the skinny statue, this is what's called the Emaciated Buddha. And often people think that, like, you see this image of the big belly Buddha and you think that that's like the Buddha, right? And I hate to like shatter it. Oh, we have a kid here. I don't know if I should say this, but so there are certain, characters in our lives that we think are real. And then eventually we realize that maybe they're not real, but keep believing they're real. It's way more fun that way, right? But the big-bellied guy was not the Buddha. His name was Hotai. He was a monk in China about 1,000 years ago. Very prosperous, very lucky. He walked around with a big bag, always had lots of stuff like gifts and things like that to give out. Very jolly, sound kind of familiar. And somehow in this culture, Western culture, he became known as the happy Buddha, and you rub his belly for good luck and things like that. Not the Buddha, he was a monk, right? From China, 1,000 years ago. So like 1,500 years after the Buddha died. This guy up here, that's actually the Buddha himself. When his name was Siddhartha, he was just a prince, right? He was a young dude growing up, and father was a king, and that's what made him a prince. And he lived a very sheltered life. And I'll sum up this story for you. But for 29 years, he had all the wealth, all the riches, everything in the world. And then he snuck out one day, and he saw old age, he saw sickness, and he saw death. And he also saw very, like a wise monk or nun, a very simple ascetic type person living a very simple life. And he went back to his buddy, and he was like, yo, what's going on? Like, what's this old age, sickness, and death? Does that happen to all of us? And his father, they sheltered him from that because they didn't want him to see that. They knew he had a really compassionate heart, and that if he knew that existed in the world, he wouldn't want to stay and be a king and rule. So his buddy was like, yeah, we're all going to age. We're going to get sick. We're going to die. That happens to all of us. And he was like, well, I can't live with all the wealth and riches and the spoiled lifestyle when there's a world that's suffering. So he snuck out. He roamed the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. And this is 2,500 years ago. So this is 500 years before Christ. And at that time in India, the religion was Hindu. So for the most part, they're all Hindu folks. They're doing Hindu practices. And they would do things like, they thought if they overcame the attachment to the physical body, that they would awaken, that they would figure out how to end suffering. So they starved themselves. And it said that he ate 1 grain of rice a day. This is what all of him and his 5 buddies were doing. So they say you could take your fingers, one to the front, one to the back, push them together, and they would touch. That's how skinny he was. And so these 6 guys are roaming around. They come to a riverbed, and this person offers him some food, like this porridge. And Siddhartha was like, I'm hungry. I want to eat. And his buddies are like, no, you can't eat. It's like, we're starving ourselves. This is the way. And he said, well, I'm going to take the bowl and I'm going to set it in the stream. And if the bowl goes against the stream, I'm going to eat. Puts it in the bowl, and the bowl in the stream goes against the stream. He starts to eat. And his buddies are like, they're really mad. I mean, they're probably hungry too, but they're really mad. He's eating, they're not. And they're like yelling at him, you food eater, you sellout, you traitor. And they're all mad. So they leave him. He then, at this point in time, develops this awareness of what in Buddhism we call the middle path. So he lived this life of starvation. That was unhealthy. The life of excess, which is what he came from, the life of a prince, was also unhealthy. So he developed a balance, right? To finish the story, he then, a little while later, there's an art piece up on the wall there above the door, above the exit sign. And there's the Buddha sitting there with like 5 guys sitting around him and some deers and animals. And those 5 guys saw him later. And they came up to him and they're like, hey, there's Siddhartha. Let's go sit with him. It looks like he's figured something out. And he taught them the first teaching, which is the 4 Noble Truths, where he said, life is filled with suffering. Most people at this stage of our lives, even as the beautiful Sarah shared, like we suffer. So most people don't deny that part, that we struggle. The second part is why. And he said, we struggle because of our greed, our anger, and our ignorance. So the practice of overcoming that is generosity, compassion, and wisdom. The 3rd noble truth, as he said, there's an ending to suffering, liberation, nirvana, freedom from suffering. And then there's the path. And the path is called the Eightfold Path, and that's correct views and thoughts and speech and action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. I rattled that off quickly. It's all on Google for free, but the reality is it's his actions that matter. So he then taught for 45 years. Those were the first 5 he taught, and they said, we'll call you the Buddha. And as I said earlier, Buddha just means awakened. So he's just some dude who was really smart, very wise, figured out how to help people suffer less. They called him the Buddha. And then at 80, he died. So, and then Buddhism spread, and here we are 2,500 years later. But coming back to this statue, we picked it when we opened the Dharmabum temple 15 years ago because this was us. We're not these fully enlightened Buddhas. We're physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually near death, right? When we started this temple. And I don't know how much closer, further away from that we are now. But really suffering. I mean, I grew up tremendous, as I kind of alluding to earlier, tremendous anger, tremendous depression, tremendous misery growing up. And it was all in my head, right? And so my entire view of the world and everything the Buddha was teaching, which is really where I finally started to listen to this stuff, was to find a balance with things. And very often we have trouble with that, right? And the question often is, well, what's the balance, right? And that middle path is different for everybody, right? If you think about how many shoes you have or how many shirts you have, how much food we eat, right? We have so much stuff. And very often it's not enough in our minds. We think if we only get one more shirt or, the next iPhone or whatever it is, that all of a sudden that's going to make us happy. But the reality is, when do we stop wanting more? And when can we just stop and actually have gratitude and appreciation for all that we have? Because everything we have in our life right now, at some point, we will lose it. It will be gone. And then we might miss it. But we're too busy focused on what's next. And so the middle path, coming back to the statue again, is about finding a balance, not just with physical things, not just with food or clothes or whatever it might be, but also with your views, your emotions, your perceptions of the world. Anyone here have some pretty extreme views and think they're right? Fascinating always to sit with so many people who are always right. I love it. Quite possibly, I know this is difficult, but quite possibly our views are not right. Well, we don't want to hear that, because that would force us to actually look at our views. Thich Nhat Hanh, I mentioned earlier, says all views are wrong. And I think this is the greatest teaching, because what this, for me, said is not so much that I'm going to let go of a view just because it's mine, but to recognize that other people also have views. But because I spend so much time trying to defend or prove or attach to mine, I'm not even listening to other people. And a lot of this ties into the questions around, any sort of oppression that exists, is people get attached to their views and they think that's it. So where can we find balance? Where can we recognize that maybe our attachment to our views needs to soften a little bit? And if we live our lives, the metaphor often is a guitar string. If you're trying to play guitar and it's too tight, it'll snap. If it's too loose, it'll sound. So try to find a balance. Yeah. So that's the Emaciated Buddha. And when we moved here 5 years ago, after 10 years downtown, obviously it came with us. And that's the one that we always, hold to as a reminder of just never forget. We're just struggling practitioners trying to get through our day. Yeah.
Thanks, Ted.
For sure. Thank you. Yeah.
If there's ever a point in your life where you feel like you're drowning and because there's just so much going on, you have to pay rent, you have to do this, you have to do that, there's just so much, and you've already tried everything, you've meditated, you've ate good, you've slept good, you've done everything that that is gonna balance you out, and you're still in that headspace where you just can't get out and you literally live in your head rent free, what do you do then?
Yeah. Great question. I usually try to repeat the questions, but I would really struggle repeating that. But I hear you. I understand the question. I'm just not going to ruin it by trying to repeat it. But there's a few things you said in there, like you meditate, you're eating well, you're just trying to pay rent, you're trying to get through your day. You feel like you're drowning, but you're meditating, you're eating well, you're doing all these things that you think are supposed to help you feel like you're not drowning, but you still feel like you're drowning, right? What specifically feels like you're drowning?
My heart and my mind and my soul.
Your heart, your mind, and your soul, all three. That's heavy, right? So, guess what? You're not drowning. You're not even in the pool. You're just sitting here. Sometimes, my first master, she always said, Jeff, when you ask a question, don't always look for an answer, but maybe rephrase the question. And what this has taught me over the years is to recognize that we get stuck very often in a story about our life. And your story right now, at least with regards to this situation, and I'm sure I'm not the first person you brought this up to, is that you feel like you're drowning. How many times have you told that story or felt that way recently?
This is the first time I can say it out loud.
Oh, really?
In the past before, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that and feeling safe to be vulnerable about this. So forget what I was about to say because it won't apply to you anymore, right? But understand that your perception of drowning is not drowning. You feel like you are because things are difficult. Things are difficult. You feel like you are because you just can't seem to get everything right. But you are. Did you eat today?
What? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was a little worried there. I was going to feed. I got food if you need it. Right? So you ate today, right? You got a place to sleep?
Yeah.
You have a way to get around? You got at least a few pairs of clothes to wear? You're doing pretty darn well, my friend. Now, when we start to crave and desire more than that, which is what a lot of people do, then we start to feel like we're drowning. If we can appreciate, I've got food, I've got clothes, I got people that care about me, I got a place to sit, there's no pool. That pool is only in your mind. Your mind then, your perception of it, then translates. This all happens very quick, and I'm not, but very often the mind's perception then translates to this heart feeling of just misery and depression. And then that translates to this feeling of like my soul is just dead. I've been there. It all started with my inability to actually have gratitude and appreciate what I have in my life. You even got a cute little teddy bear thing right there. I mean, come on, what more do you really want? How many of us want one of those? Can you hold that? Does that have a name?
These are just like a representation of my two little sisters.
Okay, so am I totally embarrassed you right now? Can you just hold that up and like show the audience here what we got? I mean, how many of you wouldn't want one of those to run around with all day long? So I'm just trying to highlight the fact that just because I've said this to you, like I said, I've been there. I know what it feels like. Just because I've said this doesn't mean you're automatically going to be like, okay, cool.
Thank you, everything.
Everything's good now. You're going to walk out of here and you're still going to have the tendency to go back to thinking the way you've always thought and still feeling like you're drowning. And so I'm just wanting you to try to remind yourself that it's just your perception that is creating the pool and you're drowning in it. But in time, if you're patient, you can come out of that. And the reality is that, whether it's paying rent or whatever stresses or pressures we have in life, they're always going to be there. And I'm not saying this to like panic you or, put you in a state of fear. It's just life. And so the better we get at finding some sense of gratitude and appreciation for what you have, the easier it is to then approach all the challenges that make us feel like we're constantly drowning. Because those challenges that, they'll change, right? They're just going to, a year from now, it'll be another difficulty. The year after that, another difficulty. But you ever had difficulties in the past? And look at you now. You made it through all of them. Was it easy? No. You ever stop and pat yourself on the back and be like, yo, I'm proud of myself? You ever done that? I'm not seeing a yes. So I'll close with this thought. So there's a question here: how do you deal with fears? And we're a little bit out of time, so I'll kind of maybe tie this together. But fear is an acronym: false evidence appearing real. So fear is actually a little bit about what I was going to kind of close with this thought, is to understand that these stories that are in our head and these things that we're so afraid of and these panics and worries that we carry in our heads and our hearts, most of them aren't even occurring. They're just stories about the future that don't even exist. And so the practice of meditation is learning to say, hey, I'm just sitting, I'm just breathing. And with my body and my mind and my thoughts present, I can be okay. And as I was starting to say, for all of us, really, give yourself once in a while a little pat on the back that says, hey, my life has been rough. I've had some challenges. I've had some difficulties. They're all relative. There's nothing wrong with looking at the terrible, disgusting things in the world and then looking at your life and still saying, hey, I've had it rough too. Because in your mind, it's been rough. No matter how traumatic it's been, whether it's this, simple, seemingly silly things or real heavy things. So give yourself some credit for making it through. Because it hasn't been easy, but you're here. So that kind of self-love, self-compassion, having a sense of appreciation for your journey, what you've gone through, is really going to help you, right? And the look on your face when I said, have you ever patted yourself on the back? You had this just blank stare, as if you'd never even thought about doing that. So I'm going to just remind her, give yourself some credit. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to close. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace and free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to the nearly 6 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic, and the family and friends who suffer at this time, and to all of those in Ukraine and surrounding areas that suffer at this time. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. So we appreciate you showing up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So we shut down we closed 18 of the last 24 months. We were closed for 16 months straight. We opened up for 6, shut down for 2, and just beautiful to be back open again now, just about 2 weeks. So I'm really grateful to be back open. For the most part, our full schedule is back. We're sitting Monday through Friday, 8 and 8:30 in the morning. Or just want to come and sit silently for 25 minutes or 2 sits back to back. That's at 8 and 8:30 Monday through Friday. And then we have classes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights, Sunday night, and Saturday morning as well. So everything you can just show up to. The Saturday morning, you do have to RSVP for that. But other than that, you can just show up. Recovery Sangha, also, we've got a couple classes in person Tuesday nights downstairs and Sunday morning. And then there's a few more recovery classes online as well. Buddha for You is open again also. So it's just great to sit with everybody. Yeah.
Is there a half-day silence?
Half-day silence is not happening yet, but soon. most likely it'll start in May. So we always did it the first Saturday of the month, and I just don't think we're really ready or prepared to do it this coming Saturday, which would be, I think, the first Saturday of the month. So we'll push it back to May. We'll probably have an RSVP for that, just so we can cap that, because it finishes downstairs, and the downstairs space is much smaller, and we don't want to put 40 people down there. So we're targeting next month to start, meaning May, to start that. And that's a 4-hour silent retreat. So if 20 minutes of silence isn't enough torture for you, you can do it for 4 hours. It's phenomenal. Everyone, to my knowledge, has survived. So thanks all for being here. Be safe. Good luck. And we'll see you all soon. Thanks all.
Thank you.